Very happy to welcome you all here to the Q&A Cafe at the Georgetown Club and on DC Cable and all your platforms and every other way you may access what we're doing here, our fun little Tuesday afternoon lunch party. And welcoming Beth Solomon, who is a longtime Georgetowner and blogger and website creator and the author of Georgetown Dish, which kind of explains in the title a lot of your career, right?
Correct.
You know, that's so congratulations, first of all, on the book.
Thank you.
And I thought what we might do is start with you, because we're going to talk a lot about Georgetown then and now. But I'm always curious about people in Georgetown and sort of what I call their Georgetown origin stories. You know, how you ended up here, why here, and of course, how you got started with your website. But why don't we just start with the story of Beth in Georgetown?
Well, first of all, I deny all the charges categorically.
I could make a joke, but...
Right. That's a very topical sentence today.
I'm glad you got it.
Well, yes, there was some illegal activity that was in my origin story, which is that I was a teenager growing up in Bethesda, which was a very quiet place. I think it really had one hardware store, and that was about it.
Georgetown used to be that way too.
Some time ago. Well, this was the 70s and getting into the 80s. And when I was a teenager, my parents would not let me go to the mall, Montgomery Mall, where all the kids were going, which was a big disappointment. But they would let me get on the T2 bus going down Wisconsin Avenue. This is how times have changed. At age 15 or so, with friends, we would take the T2 bus down to Georgetown and get out and walk around and pretend we were cool. And you can't say this anymore, but we would buy cigarettes, and that was the illegal activity. We might have tried to sneak in.
Now you'd get a vape pen, so.
Right. We might have tried to sneak into Martin's, but I don't think we were just, like, buying cigarettes was probably the extent of our illegal activity. And but it really, we walked around, and there was Commander Salamander, and
those are wonderful days.
Wonderful days. And I think Georgetown was quite bohemian then, and a little bit
and
wild.
Where would you get into to smoke your cigarettes and have a bite to eat? Or?
Well, I think we hung out outside places because we were too young. But Martin's Tavern, and there was what was the horses, the third edition. Jack Evans is here, our former council member. He knows
Georgetown historian. Yeah, there was the third edition, 100%. And I mean, you know, your book made me think of so many places we don't have anymore, like Furin's and Nemes Market. But go back to me, because I was a teenager coming to Georgetown too, but I was coming from Virginia. And I was coming with my girlfriends on a bus, but it wasn't the T2. And we would get dropped off in Georgetown and walk around. But we'd go to Clyde's and drink Coca-Colas, but smoke cigarettes. And
I'm not alone.
You're not alone. It's a fun introduction to Georgetown, because what we'd also do, and you probably did this too, is that after you like roamed around the stores and whatnot, you then started walking the side streets and seeing these amazing homes and wondering what was going on inside them.
True. And, you know, as I was coming over here today, I live in Naples, Florida now, but it is so beautiful here. This really has to be one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the world. And it's the most important neighborhood in the most important city in the world. And that's why everybody is interested in Georgetown, and Georgetown changes. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that, but it still represents the power of Washington and the prestige of Washington. And I think that's why, I mean, the history lives on, the beauty lives on, but that's why it's captivating to so many people. And the truth is, in 2009 and 2010, in the depths of the recession, when I was out of a job and suddenly found myself with way too much time on my hands, And I realized that there was no online magazine that was kind of still in the early stages of online journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have to think about printing presses anymore. We basically hijacked the brand of Georgetown, started a site, and immediately we had readers all over the world. And that's because Georgetown, the name, by the way, Bill Rice just walked in, a famous original photographer of
another
the
historian of
Georgetown.
Georgetown.
That's right. So that's kind of how I got interested in Georgetown. And the Georgetown dish, as I said, we started it in the depths of the recession, and a lot of people were out of work. The movie, there was a movie with George Clooney, Up in the Air, about all these people.
Wonderful movie,
getting laid off. And the truth was, it was a very hard time if you didn't have a job. The Georgetown dish, and there's so many people in this room, I couldn't possibly name them all, who were collaborators in our little adventure there. It was kind of a lifeboat in this recession, because if you could write and you were published, all of a sudden you were real, you were alive, people could see your byline. And so it was a lot of people, Gary Socha, formerly of the Current newspapers, who's here when I were talking about this, that it was a collaboration. First with Judith Bierman, who's now the publisher. And but what we did was we couldn't pay anyone. There was no revenue to start with, but we told them we would give them a business card. At that time, you could get that on Vistaprint.
Trade on it.
And it said the Georgetown dish. And so all of a sudden, people had an identity. And it was alive, and people were paying attention to it. And then it won the Best Business Award from the Georgetown Business Association. So it was a lifeboat, in addition to being just a very creative endeavor, and a place where people were covering what was going on in Georgetown, going to the parties. People were writing books, writing about whatever was happening in Georgetown. Thanks to Bill and Jack, we had a lot of politics in there. And I haven't said this to other groups, but this group, which has a lot of real Georgetowners in it, will recognize some of what we wrote about in terms of the controversies about George, the nightclub, and Smith Point.
I like them both very much, and I miss them.
Well, and these are this is the internecine warfare in Georgetown neighborhood politics that's very intense, because people feel very strongly about Georgetown. And what I still love about it is people feel very attached to the identity of Georgetown, very proud of it. It has a very strong identity. And I think that's why Georgetown is a perpetual ideal, maybe an ideal of how a Washington should work, or a democracy, and where important people can have civilized conversations and go to dinner parties, and somehow have a conversation about what we could do to make something better. And that really happened in Georgetown quite a bit. And Carol, I mean, living here, you've been on the inside of that. So that's why I think Georgetown is always interesting to people. This book is a collection of writing from the Georgetown dish, and it's now reading it, when I started to put it together with Judith, it seems like kind of an innocent world. I mean, we set up the Georgetowner to have comments. We wanted everyone in the neighborhood, wherever they were, to participate.
Did this
and write.
derive from the Georgetowner?
Yes, these are all things in the Georgetown dish, which was online only. And
but was it born at the Georgetowner? Is that how it got?
No. I had worked for a spell at the Georgetowner. Yeah. And then realized that there, it was tough for any print publication, and I think the Current newspapers had the same issue. It was tough to transition.
I love the Current. I still miss it.
Yes, yes, I think we all do, Gary.
It's an essential.
An essential.
Yeah.
But it's really tough to transition an online print publication to online. And so we started from scratch. And we wanted people to comment. And so we set up the site that way. And we would publish the comments on the homepage of the website. Well, now the world is so mean. I think nobody does that now because it's all changed. And it was a great time. It was a great project, and I'm so tickled that it lives on, and some of the current Georgetown Dish advertisers are here too.
Tell me this: what do you think it means to what Georgetown means to other parts of the city? Especially, is it welcoming to other parts of the city?
Well, I do have a funny story to tell, which is when we were. So I was living
because there's a lot of attitude. The Georgetown is kind of a snobbish enclave and
exclusive.
Doesn't own its African American heritage enough. And
well,
though we've started in small ways.
Yes, that conversation is happening.
The little signposts that go up that show some of the African American history.
Yes, I mean, I think every place in the country is kind of having a conversation about history and how to talk about that history. And I think Georgetown has a reputation of exclusivity and power and prestige. And on the other hand, I run into people all the time who say, I come to Georgetown to walk, to inhale and exhale and to see the beauty. And it's really there for anybody to do that. I don't think Georgetown is the same Georgetown that it was in the earlier days of
sole proprietors, because it's lost a lot of its charm to the commercial district. It's been overtaken by developers, and you get a lot of chain stores. I mean, the mall came in and was kind of like a bomb exploding in what had been old Georgetown. And what derived from that is a new version of Georgetown that arguably does not speak to the residents.
Yes, I mean, it speaks to tourists.
Yeah, but tourists are like, oh, I thought this was going to be a charming neighborhood, and it's all the same stores. That's the only. And then for those of us who live here, because you mentioned the stores we used to have. We don't have the electric store anymore. We don't have the hardware store. We don't have all the kind of stores that are indigenous to residents that residents can use to get most of your errands run. If you live here, you have to leave Georgetown to get them done.
Well, ironically and unfortunately, you see this in many places. Its popularity sort of killed some of the charm. I mean, because it's flooded on the weekends with people driving in, and it's just become a destination, a local.
Somehow it managed to survive the pandemic, and that's probably a lot to do with the residents, because we were here and we had to support it and I've always had a policy of doing all my holiday shopping in Georgetown, and I try to do all my eating in Georgetown, but the pandemic had a hard impact. Talk about that. Talk about how Georgetown got through the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic was really tough on Georgetown. I remember walking through, and the pandemic was the hardest, I think, in terms of commercially on small businesses, and so those really took it on the chin the worst. And that's been the character of Georgetown. The shops that you could find in Georgetown that you couldn't find anywhere else.
Little Caledonia.
Caledonia. There was an antique store up.
Antiques of Georgetown.
Antiques of Georgetown. Yeah. There was this kind of cool Chinese massage clinic.
It's still here.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, that endures, because we've never needed massage more.
That's right.
Right now.
That's right. Well, and you still have Cafe Milano, which unbelievably is still, it is every bit
it's the clubhouse.
The powerhouse of to see and be seen for important people in Washington.
Yeah.
And world leaders. Right, I mean, the King of Jordan strolling in, or the King of Spain.
I always like to joke with the amazing manager Laurent, that what it must be like on those nights when all in the same night, maybe not when he was president, but because Biden eats there all the time, that Biden would come in, Bill Clinton would come in, and some potentate would come in, and they'd all want the same table. And how he managed to navigate them to where they should each sit and still feel like they're at the A table.
At the best table, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Cafe Milano is an institution. I think, like you said, Carol, it was the residents and the institutions that kept Georgetown alive through the pandemic. And I think it's quite healthy now. All these new little bakeries.
Yeah, we have lots of carbs, but that's okay. Unfortunately, we just lost a startup corner market called Foxtrot, which really its failure isn't on Georgetown. It's more on the Mother Management in Chicago. But we will be getting a Stephen Starr enterprise coming in at the old Dean and DeLuca, which we desperately need. You know, we need. I always feel like we need more food because I just love to go shopping for food.
Well, we do need that. I mean, Dean and DeLuca was another institution that I mean, I think everybody misses Dean and DeLuca.
Yeah. Well, but again, that was one of those situations where you watched the home company go through 3 ownerships and just become less of what it was each time. And that's just, you know, you live long enough, you're going to see that happen to all your favorite places. So, but let's talk a little bit about people. You know, it has attracted a range of interesting people. I mean, right now we have cabinet secretaries living here. We have the president's granddaughter living here, and notoriously having one of her Secret Service vehicles attempted to be broken into. And I guess that's another aspect of Georgetown. Our crime rate is not good here. But, you know, I often, when I'm showing people around, I'll go, that's where Elizabeth Taylor lived. And they said, what? They say, what? Elizabeth Taylor lived here? And I said, yeah, Elizabeth Taylor lived here. She was married to a senator and lived right here in Georgetown and went to a club down on M Street called Pisces when we were talking about clubs that these, I don't know that we have that now. I mean, now we're getting the billionaires. You know, Eric Schmidt just bought the Jackie House. And I'm wondering, what's he going to do here?
Well, you know, Jeff Bezos bought a place in the...
But he owns the Washington Post, so I can say he has a reason to come to town. But
yeah, well, you know, everyone, if you've got the money, why not have a pied-à-terre in Georgetown? I mean... That's
what Jackie's house is. That house has an amazing history all on its own. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
The property itself?
The Jackie, they call it the Jackie Kennedy House, even though Yolande Fox lived there much longer.
Well, it's an iconic house. I've been in that house, and I mean, it's an iconic house with an iconic history. I mean, I believe she lived here before Jack did. And
well, it may have been concurrent because she was working as a young journalist, and there's a wonderful walking tour that you can do. That's all the places that Kennedy lived in Georgetown. I created a little map once that you could start at Martin's and end up at 1789 at the Tombs, or start at the Tombs and end up at Martin's. But there's all these little places where she lived, or Jack lived, or Jack's brothers and sisters lived, or Jack and Jackie lived. But that house she moved to from the White House after the assassination.
Right, and then ended up in New York. Yeah, the Kennedys, the Kennedys made a home in Georgetown, and I do think this is a big part of the mystique. Of course, it lives on in the booth where they apparently got engaged right. in Martin's Tavern, and
I think it's the most booked table there. You know,
I think it's very difficult to get. Yeah.
Your book is, you have many chapters in here that are circa 2011, 2010. What do you think were the most interesting things happening then?
Well, Innocent Spouse came out then.
Well, yeah.
Carol's
yes, thank
book,
you. Yes,
which
thank
was
you.
fascinating, and a Georgetown story. I mean,
Yeah, it is. Very much so.
as many of you know, Carol and her husband were Nathans.
He was Nathan's, and then it became mine. And I mean, and that's, I think Nathan's nothing to do with me. I think Nathan's is, the loss of Nathan's is a critical signpost for the development of Georgetown, because when Nathan's was still in business, and well, back then Reeve Ghosh, but and then even to some extent Banana Republic, but that intersection was the intersection. Mm-hmm. And because Nathan's was open till 2 a.m., that intersection didn't die at night. Now it dies at night. And it's kind of moved up to where Martin's is, because Martin's is open. And that, to my mind, has become the central intersection. But we have lost most of our pubs, I think, that right. I can recall. Not that I live pub hours anymore.
Well, you still have, I mean, you did your time at Nathan's, Carol. And
I have the gray hairs to show for it, but fortunately they
exactly
invented
the
hair
same.
dye, so.
Exactly the same. But, you know, Innocent Spouse, I mean, I think it's worth kind of talking about that for a second, because that what happened with Nathan's, what happened, I mean, the drama of that behind the scenes of Nathan's, and then what you went through. I mean, it's kind of one of those Georgetown, not legends, it's a true story, but it sort of has all that drama in it that I think is another reason people are interested in Georgetown.
Well, but in a subterranean level, it goes to some of the Byzantine rules we periodically have, like Jack Evans can remember this. Back then, one of the biggest hurdles I was up against is these rules against liquor licenses that really hamstrung me from survival, and Jack and Kathy Patterson, and why am I forgetting his name? The late Ward 1 council member,
Jim Graham.
They got together and created a workaround for me in the rules that I could keep the liquor license regardless. And so Nathan stayed in business. Now I don't think we have that kind of Byzantine rules, but I'm out of it. I'm happy to say I have nothing to do with restaurants. But what tell me, just I'd love you to recall some of the things you remember from when you were living here, and what were your favorite things to do, your favorite places to go? Who were the most interesting people?
Well, I loved it. I loved Georgetown because it is a neighborhood where you would practice yoga at Down Dog. You'd stop in Martin's Tavern and see somebody you knew. You could walk up to the bar and run into Janet Donovan or the King of Jordan at the bar at Naples, or you would go to the dry cleaner and a senator would be standing behind you. So it felt like a small neighborhood in a big city, and certainly a beautiful one. We reported on when Barack Obama brought the president Medvedev of Russia to raise Hellburger.
But not Georgetown.
It was Georgetown. I mean,
it was Arlington.
No, it was Georgetown. I think the restaurant also has a branch in Arlington.
Okay.
And the Bush daughters and the Obama daughters would go to Georgetown Cupcake, and
well, the Bush daughters were notorious at Smith Point. They were.
That's right. That's right.
A game I used to like to play with friends was to go to Smith Point, and they would be there, and to try to figure out who in the crowd were the Secret Service agents, because they meshed them in so well with the others.
Yeah, that's very Georgetown, Carol. Yeah, the Obama daughters were younger, but they were here, and I think Obama took Barack Obama
to Thomas Sweet, famously.
Yes,
I actually happened to be there that day. I couldn't believe what was happening. Then next thing, there's Secret Service and SUVs pulling up everywhere, and But Thomas Sweet has survived. Thomas Sweet's such a good example of a business that has endured.
Well, and it's interesting if you think about it. It was the Bush daughters hanging out at Smith Point. It was the Obama daughters wanting to come here, whether it was to Thomas Sweet and it was us as teenagers from the suburbs who wanted to come here. It was, you couldn't just go to New York, but Georgetown had that same draw, that sophistication, and so it's interesting that I think it in the minds of especially maybe teenage girls, it's an iconic place, and then as an adult you just get to know it and appreciate it and love it. And I think at a certain time, with Sally Quinn and Ben Bradley throwing dinner parties all the time, I think at some point, and Francesca Craig is here, she would know, like it was a real social center for in terms of the dinner party scene. I don't know how many people really go to dinner parties anymore.
I'll tell you my take, and I've discussed this with friends in Georgetown. It's not that people in Georgetown don't still have dinners together, but a couple of things happened. The pandemic especially. People's lives changed in diverse and interesting ways. But I think some of the important ways they changed is learning how to take care of ourselves, learning how to cook at home, learning how to entertain ourselves. Perhaps creating a greater appreciation of that thing Georgetown gives us is friendship with our neighbors, that I find to be not unique to Georgetown, but relatively unique in a city that's lots of apartment buildings. I think also the social fabric of the city, and it may never go back. I'm not going to say it changed because of Trump. I think it started to change because of Bush, and not so much politics, as they were a very stay-at-home couple, Bush 43, And I remember one time, and others will probably remember this, Laura and George Bush decided to go to Cactus Cantina for dinner, and it caused such a massive gridlock that they were like, well, we're not going to go out to dinner again. But a lot of social life gets derived from the White House. And when you have a very divided city, it becomes harder to decide who to invite. And certain people don't want to be at parties with certain people. So that's a factor. And then also a lot of the social life became pay to play. They just became fundraisers. And nothing against fundraisers, but it changes the whole. And I imagine these things have a lot to do with it too, because you think you're going to go to a very private dinner party and the next thing your pictures are on Instagram.
Yes. Well, we do have a problem in this country. I think you probably noticed, which is people can't talk to each other anymore if they're on, if they're in different political parties. Like you can't. It's
difficult.
The other side is the enemy. It's scorched earth. I'm not. And so this is, this has happened in Congress. Lindley Bohr knows this, that they don't socialize, and they're going home to their district. So we become, and the phones have a lot to do with that we just want to be in our own echo chamber. And so the whole way people socialized, the way people socialized politically, I think has drastically changed, Carol. And so that would naturally be affecting Georgetown and the social life.
Also, Georgetown is historically a particularly politically heightened community. Maybe more so in the 60s, because the Kennedy White House, people wanted to live near the White House because they were all going over there and partying all the time. And now people have moved further out and further out and further out. I'm not saying that it's still not a politically heightened community, but the houses that roll over, like an old-time Georgetowner may, shall we say, pass on, but their house turns over, and it's not anymore to a official kind of person. It might be a tech person or money. It's a different social life. It's a different crowd of people.
Yeah.
we will survive, but it's not so much that Georgetown was a bedroom community of the White House or Capitol Hill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Georgetown is a great brand. It's a global brand. You put the name Georgetown on anything.
I assume you copyrighted Georgetown Dish, right?
I hope so. But at some point, like it's you can kill the goose that laid the golden egg, or everybody's. I hate to say this, but everybody's paradise, gets destroyed because the popularity of it kills it. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in Georgetown because Georgetown has existed for too long, and there's something real here, which is an absolutely beautiful urban environment that people will always want to live in. Have the commercial strips, become predominantly chains? And is there, do we want to see that? Do we want to see the streets flooded on the weekends from people driving in, from wherever? Well, not exactly, but this happens, and it's just like Manhattan is never going to lose its appeal.
No.
Neither will.
It's just going to move to Brooklyn.
Yeah. People, people find what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, what do you still publish the Georgetown Dish?
Judith Bierman is the publisher, and yes, it's.
And how many reporters?
How many reporters, Judith?
Oh.
How many reporters?
Yeah.
About 7.
Yeah, great. And you're not in the online blog business anymore?
I have, I do a lot of posting, but I've written, this book was put together of things I wrote before, and I'm working on a new book that's coming out in November called From Fired to Fabulous, How to Turn Professional Fiascos into Your Launchpad to Success.
Okay.
And I've been fired a lot. I was fired a lot. That's why
that could be a title too.
In fact, I've been fired more than anyone I know. But I realized that that's the basis for a story. And it was one of the bright spots of being fired was that I got to start the Georgetown Dish.
Yeah.
I mean,
silver lining.
You don't see the benefits until later, but that's what this book is about. And then I'm working on.
Do you have a memorable firing? A most memorable?
Yeah, a few of them, yeah.
Come on, share one.
Well, let's see. Yes, the most dramatic one I would say was I had been the CEO of a small trade association, which are kind of advocacy organizations for business, and I had been hired. I had been hired by a board of directors who. Their organization was in tatters. There were flying termites in the office. The IRS was sending cease and desist letters. You have not filed taxes. You cannot exist now. So the website, looked like a 1972 Pinto overturned in a ditch that couldn't drive. I mean, so it was really a shambles. And they hired me. Marilyn Smith, who's here, is my editor on that book. They hired me to fix it. And so because of the termites and stuff, and by the way, there was one employee left. Everyone had left, and she was very, very angry. So I got to work. I flipped open my laptop in Starbucks or, eventually a borrowed office, and I got people to fix the website, and we got conference attendance up, and we turned all this, red ink into, we were making money, revenue surplus, and I hired some great people, and, we were chugging along. So we were about 18 months in, and I was paid well, but I realized that I was only paid like half of what my male counterparts were paid in the same kinds of groups and the same size. And I thought that was something that should be fixed too. And That was a big mistake. Well, it wasn't a big mistake, but in any case, I had asked for a raise based on our numbers and based on what was equal in terms of how people were being paid doing the job I was doing. And so my board members, the CEO or the chairman, the vice chair, the treasurer said they would be coming to Washington. And it was about time to discuss the budget for the next year. And I thought, this is great. So I woke up at like 5 o'clock that morning. I went to the gym. I put on my good luck robin's egg blue suit and got all these pastries. And we had the coffee going. I got to the office about 8 o'clock, and my young team, they were all working away on their computers. I thought, this is awesome. And the chairman and the vice chair and the treasurer came in and right on time at 9 o'clock. And I said, oh, coffee, tea, what would you like? We have bagels, we have muffins, we have fruit here, make yourself at home. And the treasurer said, he walked into the conference room and he said, shut the door, Beth. And I thought, oh, that's kind of abrupt, but he was this kind of tough New Yorker, Brooklyn guy. I was like, okay, I sure hopped up, shut the door. And then the chairman, who was a small woman running a little community lender, and she had hired me, she pulled out some papers and they started to rattle in her hands, and she started to read them. And I mean, the papers were rattling so loudly, it sounded like a bird flapping its wings. And she said, Beth, she was reading, the board of directors of the national, whatever it was, met on May 15th and voted to terminate your employment effective immediately. We'd like you to sign. And she, it was all the usual language, how modern terminations are being done. And she said she wouldn't, nobody was looking at me. They were all looking down at their keyboards. And she said, do you have any questions? I said, yeah. I said, why? Why? That was the question I had. Why? And she said the same thing. Well, we've decided to go in a different direction. And she kept reading the language. And I said, but was it something I did? And she read the same language over and over. We've decided to go in a different direction. And, my head is spinning, and, it's you're just trying to figure out what to say and not.
Can't think straight, and the blood's rushing out of your brain.
And I said, well, can I talk with my team? Because I was feeling complete shock and panic, and I didn't want them to go through that. I said, could I just talk with my team? And they said, your team has left the building. So then I was like, oh my God, what did they tell them? But anyway, they said, you can pack up your desk now, or we can have your stuff shipped. And I thought for a second, and I was kind of a minimalist. I didn't have too much stuff. I saw my beautiful IKEA desk in the corner there. And I by this time, like, I'm like getting a hold of myself. And because I'm thinking, oh my God, and they're stupid. Why are they doing this? I mean, and then this little channel lit up in my brain. And I thought, Beth, you are going to be fine. This has happened to you before. And so by then I composed myself enough to say, yeah, I'll just pack up my desk. And then so I was putting stuff into bags, sweeping picture frames and hairbrushes and electronics and plugs and a couple of books. And by the time I did that, I was actually feeling much better. And I think on my way out, I actually said to them, look, best of luck. If there's anything I can do, let me know. And because I didn't, it was as traumatic as that was, I didn't want to show them how I really felt. And I walked out of the building and I called our PR person who had just worked miracles. And I said, guess what? They fired me. She said, what? Who? And so she started a fountain of epithets that you can't say on TV of how stupid they were, which of course felt better. That's exactly what you want to hear in that moment. And then anyway, that night I happened to be going on a first date with a real CEO, and I went home. So after I brought all my stuff home, and it was of course raining, and I was just a wet mop by the time I got home. And I thought, should I cancel this date because I'm going out with this guy I think is really cool, and he's a CEO, and I just got fired as a CEO.
Let me ask you this: did you file suit?
Well, I got a lawyer.
Okay. Yeah.
And the lawyer negotiated really a great severance. I think I got 6 months severance plus health insurance for having an 18-month assignment. And if they had told me at the beginning, and this is, the premise of this book, From Fired to Fabulous, is, getting fired is the best thing that's ever happened to you until that point. You're not going to see it until much later. And of course, you have to be financially prepared to go through these things. But they ended up giving me 6 months severance for an 18-month stint. And during that time, I got another job, and I was actually being paid double, during that time. But if I had known up front that it was going to be an 18-month assignment that I would be paid an extra 6 months for, not working, I would have said, where do I sign?
For jobs we're going to get fired from then, right?
So anyway, the book is about how to recover from being fired.
Well, clearly you've recovered.
I did.
Yeah. And now, so do you consider yourself a full-time author now?
Yes,
or are you doing something
I do.
else?
I like to say I'm retired enough, which means I'm living a great life. I play tennis. This is my first book, and then thank you. And From Fire to Fabulous, right, is coming out in November, and then after that, I've got a draft of. During the pandemic, I converted a Toyota minivan, and I actually spent 6 months driving around the country during the pandemic. So that will be another book. The working title is something like Toyota Nomad.
That's wonderful. On the Road with Beth Solomon. The book is Georgetown Dish. The author is Beth Solomon. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for being here, Karen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.